The Print sat through one such meeting and found the CM at pains to explain that the Prime Minister of the country cares about Manipur.
When I, along with my colleague Suraj, visited the RSS office on November 23rd, BSF personnel were guarding the office. Several BJP members that I spoke to told me that the state of lawlessness could be gauged from the fact that even the RSS office in a BJP-ruled state was not spared.
A few local residents in Churachandpur said that their anger, their resentment was not against their Meitei brothers or the Meiteis living in the hills, but against the state government.
The NH102B is the only safe route for the displaced Kuki Zomi who want to return to Manipur or get out of the state.
Manipur has been in turmoil for over 19 months. More than 250 people have lost their lives and thousands have been displaced. Violence erupts in cycles. Brief periods of calm are shattered by sudden outbreaks of attacks, arson, and loss of life. Despite the police and security forces scrambling to restore order, their efforts consistently fall short. The situation resembles a ticking time bomb, with warring factions now employing advanced equipment such as drones and manufacturing rockets and missiles up to 9 feet long. The conflict intensifies every 2 to 3 months with no resolution in sight. Manipur is not just struggling with ethnic strife, but also a fractured governance system. The Chief Minister, police, and security forces, including the army and Assam Rifles, are at odds with one another. The lack of coordination between the Biren Singh-led government and security forces has further exacerbated the crisis. Meanwhile, the ruling BJP in the state has become a divided house. Since day one, ThePrint has remained committed to covering the Manipur crisis. Just like in 2023, even in 2024, our reporters Sourav Burman, Moushumi Dasgupta, Karishma, Hasnat, and I, along with photojournalists Suraj, Bisht, Manisha, Mondal, video journalist Danish Mand Khan, continued to bring the most important stories from the ground, an exceptionally challenging task given the unfamiliar language, difficult terrain, and volatile conditions. In January, Sourav travelled to Manipur as More emerged as the new epicenter of violence. Villages were set ablaze and schools were vandalized. Let's hear from Sourav about his experience reporting from More.
It was in January this year when I first landed in Manipur. The first few days were spent covering the launch of the Bharat Jodo Nyaya Yatra of the Congress Party. That yatra was being flagged off from Imphal, the state capital of Manipur. The scars of the conflict, which started way back in May 2023, were all too pervasive, even as the yatra of the Congress Party made its way to Nagaland's Kohima from Imphal. The major leaders of the Congress, including top leaders like the former Chief Minister Ibobi Singh, had to stay back in Imphal as the bus that they were travelling in entered the hill districts dominated by the Kuki community. Even media personnel were made to deboard by local pressure groups in the hills who were very certain about not allowing any Meitei to step into the areas inhabited by them, members of the community. From Kohima, after covering the yatra, I returned to Imphal and began my coverage of the conflict in Manipur. Around that time, More was, as Ananya also mentioned, it became the epicenter of the fresh bout of violence. Located close to the Myanmar border, the town saw acts of arson allegedly by commandos of the Manipur police and Meitei supremacist private militia Arambai Tengol. Following the killings of 2 personnel of the force of the Manipur State Police, allegedly in the hands of militants of the Kuki community. When we reached there on the 20th of January, we found the town completely ransacked. It was in the grip of violence even in May 2023 when the conflict broke out in Manipur, as Meiteis who were staying in More then were all driven out from the town. This time it was the Kukis who were at the receiving end of violence. from 3 schools to 3 commercial establishments to 17 odd houses. The entire town was on fire, prompting its residents to turn to the nearest town in Myanmar for help, as the available fire dousing infrastructure in Moreh struggled. It got completely overwhelmed. Moreh did not have enough fire engines to douse the fire. Back in Imphal, the city was deeply divided along ethnic lines, with not a single Kuki family staying back. Arambai Tengol had taken over many such abandoned properties of Kukis and other ethnic groups, and the group was also indulging in acts of extortion in the name of protection money from traders and businessmen. It was common to find people putting up banners declaring their ethnicity outside their homes. For example, a Naga family would put out a banner saying, we are Nagas. Meitei Pangals were Muslims. They would put out a signage saying, this house belongs to a Meitei Pangal family, just to avoid any reprisal. On the political front, with the Lok Sabha elections due in a few months, because I was there in January and elections in Manipur, Lok Sabha elections were held in April, CM N. Biren Singh was facing heat from Meitei groups to act decisively against the Kuki militants, who had also attacked villages in Imphal Valley as well as the Bishnupur district. There was also public posturing on his part as he questioned the role of the central forces deployed in the state. In April, I headed back to Imphal. The Congress had fielded Bimol Akwijam, a professor in Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University, as its candidate from the Inner Manipur seat. We met him, we interviewed him. The Congress went on to win both the Inner and Outer Manipur seats, and the results essentially reflected the anger among the people of the state, both the Meiteis and the Kukis, against the BJP government in the state as well as the centre. Ahead of the elections, the lack of outreach from the Prime Minister, the fact that he never visited the state or spoke about the crisis in detail publicly, became a major liability for the BJP. CM Biren Singh tried to address that in private meetings in his residence with community leaders of Meiteis. The Print sat through one such meeting and found the CM at pains to explain that the Prime Minister of the country cares about Manipur. Both in the hills and the valley, campaigning was subdued as the Meitei and Kuki pressure groups, notwithstanding their differences, had similar viewpoints on the need to avoid large public meetings, not to use loudspeakers. Naturally, the elections were shorn of the vibrancy and colour which is associated with Indian elections everywhere. Crossing over from the Imphal Valley to the hill districts at times felt like travelling between neighbouring nations locked in a war or a dispute.
In a lawless environment where armed locals created a hostile atmosphere, we as reporters not only faced bullets flying over our heads but also witnessed vehicles being torched and endured frequent identity checks by mobs. Despite being cornered by angry crowds and caught in crossfires, we delivered accurate and impactful stories. A striking example is Manisha Mondal's story, where she travelled from Guwahati to Aizawl and then to Churachandpur in Manipur, tracing the journey of Kuki Zoo students.
I went to Manipur in January 2024. My companions were 2 Kuki medical students who were going back to Churachandpur, a Kuki-dominated area in the hills of Manipur. After the violence in May 2023, it has been nearly impossible for any Kuki Zoo Mar to enter Imphal Valley. It was completely out of bounds for them. After May 2023, there was a mass exodus of tribals from valley and Meiteis from hill-dominated regions. Now coming back to the story, it took me almost 1 month and countless calls and messages to find Leen and Thangboilal Vaipe. Both of them are medical students who were travelling to Churachandpur so that they can appear in their exam that was cancelled because of the violence. Both had witnessed violence when they were in Imphal in their college. I met Leen and Thangboilal in Guwahati, and there onwards we took a flight to Aizawl and then a cab to their college in Churachandpur. It took us 20 hours from Aizawl to Churachandpur in a Tata Sumo. It was a carefully planned trip because of the risks and also the circumstances in Manipur. As we were about to embark on this journey, the driver told us, "Fill your stomachs, empty your bladders because night is going to be difficult." We had to wait for almost 3 hours at the cab station as the driver packed the car with all the medicine and food supplies that had to be delivered to Suraj. We started our journey at 3 p.m. on 102 highway. Reminder, this is a highway which has always been used by heavy trucks to supply materials, but now it has become a common road for tribals who want to travel from Manipur to other parts of the country. The road was a nightmare. It was muddy, full of potholes, no signboards, no street light. The NH102B is the only safe route for the displaced Kuki Zomi who want to return to Manipur or get out of the state. Imphal is completely off limits for tribals in Manipur and as well as the Imphal airport. I think the journey was only bearable because I had Lean and Thangboilal. The conversation that started over food. The duo introduced me to tribal cuisine. God, amazing food. And then carried with sweet pineapple sold at local shop. Lean and Thangboilal talked about their dreams, called Manipur their homeland, and discussed what they witnessed on 3rd May. They spoke in length about how their lives have been affected and it will probably take decades to everything be normal. For most of the journey, there are no resting areas. The car stopped only when someone had to use loo in the forest. With disrupted sleep on the wobbly roads, finally, after 26 hours, I remind you we started at 6 a.m. from Guwahati, we reached our destination, Churachandpur. The journey had ended, but it had left us with many thoughts. The second story that I documented in Churachandpur as a visual reporter was the life of tribal women. Ever since violence erupted between the Meiteis and Kuki Zomi in May 2023, the women of the tribal community have stepped out of their homes and their traditional roles as caregivers for their husbands, brothers, children, fathers, and extended family members is now changed. Now they are the defenders, peacemakers, accountants, planners, and organizers for this community. Hands that crushed garlic and fermented fish in the kitchen are now handling guns, forming human chains, staging protests, running checkposts, and volunteering at the forefront along with the regular household duties. It's a movement led by women organization at the grassroots level, which flies in the face of tradition. I met 2 women, Rebecca and Pari, who guided me through and helped me understand the role of tribal women in the conflict zone of Manipur. Since the violence broke out, these women have been assigned several roles, that including holding arms as a village frontline workers and protecting the frontline villages from any attack. At the Churachandpur border, the Kukizo women stand with lathis, check the cars that are entering the area. There are several tribal women groups who are working, coordinating their duties. Among these women, there are several who are helping as cooks and delivering supplies at the frontiers. Documenting the lives of these women was interesting. To witness women in their elements, standing fearless for their homeland. Few days in Manipur, the experience is indescribable in words. I'm thankful to everyone who shared their stories with me, also people who helped me, guided me.
Our journalists ensured that the conflict was covered with factual accuracy and impartiality, even amid rampant misinformation and conflicting narratives. The polarized environment made it difficult to establish facts, but through swiftly establishing sources and networks, we brought to our readers untold stories and a closer perspective on ground reality. For me personally, the most challenging part of this assignment was sifting fact from fiction. What made it even harder was the conflicting narratives from those in positions of authority. I realized that in sensitive situations requiring collective effort, the state's security apparatus was plagued by a lack of coordination and consensus. For example, on September 1st, bombs were allegedly thrown at a Meitei village in Kotruk from the hills. The police described it as a significant escalation in the ongoing violence in Manipur. However, both the Assam Rifles and the Indian Army denied finding any evidence of such an attack. As part of my reporting assignment, I travelled all the way to Kotruk, and the signs of destruction by the drone bombing were evident in the village. Vehicles lay charred, a house was in ruins, and the grass looked scorched. Although Kuki Impi, the apex body of the Kuki tribes who live up in the hills, denied the involvement of its peoples in that drone bombing, village defense volunteers who were Metis, armed with weapons such as single-barrel guns that they claimed are licensed, and walkie-talkies, stood guard at the village entry with their eyes constantly on the hills. A few volunteers also hid inside the trenches that they had created by digging up the ground, ready to draw fire. Now, this is an incredibly dangerous situation. Imagine a conflict-ridden state where the chief minister who oversees the police claims he's powerless and the DGP is not following his orders. A place where bombs and rockets are being launched, the state's machinery has collapsed, and authorities openly contradict each other. Capturing this chaos in my reporting was crucial to showing just how dire the security situation in Manipur had become. One of the most alarming trends I reported on was the rise of community-based intelligence networks. Both the Kukis and Metis are now collecting their own intelligence, arming themselves accordingly, and essentially taking on roles traditionally held by security forces or the police. They have set up their own checkpoints, conducting operations in uniform that they have sourced from somewhere, and have armed themselves with sophisticated weapons. In fact, social media is playing a huge role in escalating tensions. For instance, videos, which some are authentic, some are not, show vehicles allegedly carrying missiles and rocket launchers. Even if the footage is not from Manipur, it stokes fear and drives communities to arm themselves further, often with even more deadlier weapons. And in fact, some have even started manufacturing their own weapons because of this. And these include rocket launchers and missiles, something that we reported on extensively when I had gone there in September this year. These weapons, which are over 9 feet long, weigh about 24 to 40 kgs and have a range of 8 to 10 kilometers, are now part of the conflict. Police officers, in fact, joke grimly about always keeping an eye on the sky during their patrols, unsure where the next missile might come from. Since this advanced weaponry has a long range, it has become a massive headache for security agencies. It means the attacks are no longer confined to the fringe areas, but can strike deeper into villages. Once aerial attacks such as these, including drone attacks, start, it becomes even more challenging to contain the situation. Security forces have responded with searches, combing operations, and area domination exercises with a 5-kilometer radius of hill villages, but these efforts have yielded little success. Then there's also a concern that highly trained professionals with technical expertise may be aiding these attacks. Sources have suggested possible connections with neighboring Myanmar, where the People's Defence Force, that is the PDF, has reportedly used similar aerial bombings against the junta government in recent months. Containing the situation in Manipur remains a monumental challenge. Senior officers have admitted that deploying more forces won't solve the crisis. They emphasize that what's needed is a political solution, one built on meaningful dialogue. But unfortunately, that solution seems like a distant dream. As is common in Manipur, violence erupted again. Within just 2 months after September, when 6 Metis, including 3 children, were abducted and killed in Jiribam. During that time, Moushumi Dasgupta was on the ground reporting from the state. Let's hear from her.
I'm Moushumi Dasgupta, Deputy Editor with ThePrint, and I visited Manipur first last May 9th to be specific, exactly a week after ethnic violence broke out in the hill district of Churachandpur. I visited Manipur again after over a year in November this year, after another spate of violence began in the state on November 7th in Jiribam district, 220 km from the capital Imphal on the Manipur-Assam border. The fresh bout of violence was triggered following the alleged killing of 10 Kuki militants by the CRPF in retaliatory firing after they attacked their camps in Jiribam. While the attack on the CRPF camp was on, 6 Meitei women and children were taken hostage by a group of suspected Kuki militants from Jiribam's Boko Vera neighborhood. The violence that ensued claimed lives of close to a dozen people. The law and order situation further deteriorated when on November 16, the police found the bodies of 3 of the 6 missing Meitei people, including that of a child from the Barak River on November 15th night. Violent protests erupted in the valley the next day. Protesters attacked the residences of 3 state ministers and 6 MLAs. The state government imposed curfew in 5 districts for an indefinite period and suspended internet services in parts of the state. Protesters ransacked the houses of 3 cabinet ministers in the Biren Singh government, including that of the CM's son-in-law. While security forces fired tear gas shells to disperse protesters in different parts of Imphal. Even the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh's Prakhand or the block office in Haraoro, located some 15 km from Imphal city, was not spared. A mob comprising about 150 people stormed the premises on the morning of 17th November, damaging whatever came their way. The ambulance parked inside the premises, window panes, doors, computer, television sets, whatever came their way. When I, along with my colleague Suraj, visited the RSS office on November 23rd, BSF personnel were guarding the office. Several BJP members that I spoke to told me that the state of lawlessness could be gauged from the fact that even the RSS office in a BJP-ruled state was not spared. These are not isolated incidents. The MLAs said that it has been in continuity over what was going on in the state since the last several months. They said that even the elected representatives are living under a climate of fear. The MLAs told me that they are not talking openly about what is happening in Manipur, fearing repercussions by armed groups. Talking about how the atmosphere of fear is playing out, one Meitei MLA told me that all the assembly constituencies in the Imphal Valley now have a unit of Arambai Tengal, a Meitei socio-cultural group which transformed into a radical armed outfit operating like militia since the ethnic conflict with the Kukis broke out last May. Even the MLAs were expected to give them donations for buying arms, ration, etc. It's happening openly, but nobody dared speak about it out of fear, the MLAs told me. And then there are several other armed groups beside the Arambai Tengal who have become active and are openly indulging in extortion and threats in the valley. I also visited 2 hill districts, Churachandpur and More, to see the situation prevailing on the ground. The hill districts have been completely cut off from the valley. Manipur is now completely segregated on ethnic lines. No Kuki civilian population is in the valley, and there are no Meiteis in the hills. The divide is so deep that no Meitei Hindu driver from the valley agreed to go with us to Churachandpur and More. We had to hire a Meitei Muslim driver called Pangas to go there. The Meitei Pangas have stayed neutral in the ethnic conflict and are acceptable by both the communities, and hence they can go to the hill districts as well as return to the valley. When I went to More, there was an eerie silence over the once bustling, small trading town on the Indo-Myanmar border. The rifle-toting Central Armed Police Forces personnel far outnumbered the locals on the town's streets. The Indo-Myanmar Friendship Bridge in More, via which traders from across the border came to sell their goods sourced not only in Burma but also in Thailand and China, had long fallen silent. The bridge connected More to Kalewa town in Myanmar's Sagaing division. Several businesses have closed shutters. battering the economy of this border town, seen as India's gateway to South Asia and Southeast Asia. The violence has thrown life out of gear for people across the state. However, the impacts appear starker in Moreh, the commercial hub sharing a 390-kilometer border with Myanmar. Armed groups have attacked and burnt Meitei houses in this multi-ethnic town, home also to the tribal Kukis, Nagas, Tamils, Biharis, Sikhs, Nepalis, Bengalis, and Uriyas, among others. The violence has forced the town's entire civilian Meitei population to flee Moreh. They either took refuge in Imphal Valley, where most community members live, or moved to the neighboring states such as Guwahati, Mizoram, and Meghalaya. Today, the Meiteis in Moreh mainly constitute the Manipur police commandos. Their number, however, has also gone down following the January 2024 attack launched by armed groups on the police camp. My colleague Sourav had told you about his experience when he visited Moreh in January earlier in the video. And it is not just the Meiteis who have fled the town. With border trade, the mainstay of Moreh's economy, coming to a halt, many people from other communities that had businesses in Moreh have moved out, some temporarily till normalcy returns. A senior official in the security establishment posted at Moreh told ThePrint that roughly 35,000 people lived in the town before the violence broke out in May last year. The number has now come down to 10,000. The situation in Churachandpur is no different. The local Kuki population narrated the hardships that they have been forced to endure since violence erupted. None of them can go to Imphal airport if they are traveling out of the state. Instead, they have to take a circuitous route by road to either Aizawl or Guwahati.
Manipur is not a homogeneous state. It comprises multiple ethnic groups intricately woven together. To help our readers and viewers better understand this complex conflict, we brought you videos, voices from various perspectives, whether it's the politicians, security officials, or the stories of general public.
Our initial stories from Manipur were not from 3 May 2023 when violence first erupted, but we had been covering every single development leading up to the chaos that day. The political upheaval in the state and the rebellion against Manipur Chief Minister N. Biren Singh's leadership, the protests in the valley areas demanding the implementation of the NRC and against illegal immigration from Myanmar, protests in the hill districts against the alleged high-handedness of the state government, the eviction in the tiny village of Songjang, every such event. In fact, our first stories highlighting how ethnic strains between the two communities were reignited in the insurgency-battered state came as early as 15th of March 2023. I was rushed to Manipur towards April end last year, thanks to the good thinking by our editorial team. Around this time, the shutdown calls by tribal bodies against the evictions saw clashes and roadblocks, and even the imposition of Section 144 in Churachandpur from April 27, 2023 onwards. There was a brief lull though from April 30 to May 2. I had spoken with the Kuki-Zo tribal leaders who were clear of their stance that they wanted to have a discussion with the central government and not the state leadership. When I was entering Churachandpur, I had to steer through roadblocks every 100 meters along the way. I'd spoken with local residents in Churachandpur and had also met a Manipur civil services aspirant in the area who was kind enough to offer me a lift to my destination. He said something which I still remember, and I quote, "Bunds, strikes, blockades, there's no time to rest in Manipur," end quote. So this is the pattern of protests and clashes that have taken place over the years, which we have also brought out through our reportage from the region since the past many years. People have adapted themselves to living under such circumstances, but no one had thought of seeing such unprecedented violence that started from May 3, almost 2 years ago. A few local residents in Churachandpur said that their anger, their resentment was not against their Meitei brothers or the Meiteis living in the hills, but against the state government. Remember, until that time, the Kuki-Zo community and the Meiteis were cohabiting, were living together in the hills and valley areas. On 3rd of May 2023, right after the Atsum's tribal solidarity rally, which was taken out in 7 hill districts, there were reports of clashes and stone pelting from Churachandpur and adjoining areas, from Kangwai, Thorbung, and also from the valley district of Bishnupur. Clashes were reported. We received calls on houses being burned and people saying that few of them were injured in the clashes. All this time, I had tried to connect with the superintendents of police in both Bishnupur and Churachandpur district, but received no response. By evening that day, violence had spread to Imphal West district and Section 144 was imposed. Internet services were curtailed. There were reports of arson from some parts of the capital and even chaos being reported from Manipur University. From my hotel rooftop in Imphal city, I could see fires around the Langaul hills and the entire city engulfed in darkness. Guests were evacuated from the hotel and shutters were downed. I continued to receive calls about reports of arson and also how a particular police station was ransacked by locals that day and weapons taken away. The next morning, on 4th of May 2023, I set out with my friend on a scooter to see the situation on ground. It was terrible. The rupture in ethnic ties between the two communities was grimly apparent in the trail of destruction that we saw on ground. Charred houses, broken windows, ravaged religious structures, ransacked courtyards. It was a tense situation. Locals huddled in groups along the stretch of the road, uncertain of what was to come. Some of the people were seen buying fuel from the black market, as is normally seen in situations like this. Even as the Manipur government conducted meetings and tried to clean the mess, the lost trust between the communities seemed harder to fix, and it still hasn't been fixed. In August 2023, I had visited the border town of Moreh along the Indo-Myanmar border to report how the ethnic conflict in Manipur and the crisis in Myanmar had impacted the cross-border trade between the two countries. Of course, informal but once flourishing, the halt in cross-border trade had severely impacted communities either side of the border. This year, I visited Manipur in June and conducted separate interviews with the Chief Minister N. Biren Singh and the spokesperson of the Kuki National Organization, Dr. Selen Hauke. The divisions are deep. Even as the centre and the state government have announced measures time to time, we are yet to see a solution. The violence has only ebbed and flowed, and it has gotten worse. Women and children continue to be targeted, to be killed.
At ThePrint, we remain determined not to forget the Manipur story. We are committed to returning to the violence-hit state to continue uncovering stories of suffering, the breakdown of law and order, human rights violations, and the alarming security situation. Even as the government appears to have abandoned efforts to resolve this crisis, allowing the conflict to persist, we have kept our eye on the ball. Our dedicated ground coverage of the crisis in 2023 has been recognized by the International Press Institute. And we promise not to let our readers and viewers down. Through our relentless reportage, we will continue raising the critical questions that serve public interest. Thank you for watching.